Welcome to the show. This is Talkin Folk, and this is Nick. This is Talkin Folk, the show. I've never said that before. Anyway, welcome to the show. Today we are talking Bright Eyes, and if you didn't know this, 2 weeks ago, Bright Eyes released a new album called Down in the Weeds, Where the World Once Was, and it's their first album in 11 years. Or 9 years. Sorry, 2011. 9 years. And it's 2020. Whew, man. So I thought that instead of just doing a review on the album, which I am going to release, their new album, I never thought I would get the chance to actually do a rundown on Bright Eyes and have it be current. And what I mean by that is they hadn't released an album since 2011, and I don't think there was any intention for them to release an album after the last one was done and released and all that. Circumstances changed, and they decided to get back together for another album. It may prove to be their last again, or it may not. We have no idea, obviously, but I love Bright Eyes, and I've been listening to them for a long time, and I'm happy that they have new music that's out, and I can talk about it. But I'm sure that there's a lot of people who don't know Bright Eyes and haven't listened to Bright Eyes, and maybe they're like, "Oh, there's a good amount of buzz from other musicians that are out there that are posting. Thank God there's a new Bright Eyes album. They're posting it to their social medias. They're loving it and listening to it." And maybe there's a bunch of people out there who are like, "Well, I don't really know anything about them." So that's why we're here. So this is going to be part one. Careful what you sign up for. This is going to be part one of my Bright Eyes history. No, it's not a history. This is part one of my Bright Eyes review. Part one is not actually going to be anything about Down in the Weeds, Where the World Once Was. Part one is going to be about the songs that I think are important to know through Bright Eyes and their history, from their super early work through their commercial peak in the early 2000s, and then to probably, they were still really popular to some of their fans, but they were releasing good music, but I don't know that it's as well known as one of their albums, which kind of is probably considered their most successful album, which we'll get to in a little bit. It's amazing to me, as I've done research for this show, how many people, other musicians, either respect Bright Eyes, have listened to them growing up, taken inspiration from them. The list ranges from someone like Phoebe Bridgers, who everyone kind of knows at a surface level is very close to Conor Oberst. They work together on Better Oblivion Community Center. They tour together. Christian Lee Hudson in the same vein. To Mac Miller, recorded a Bright Eyes cover in 2014, I believe. Post Malone loves Bright Eyes and loves a particular album, I'm Wide Awake It's Morning, which we're going to talk about in a second. So it's not just folk artists. It's not just alt rock, which, you're going to hear a little bit of as we look at their really early stuff, is probably borderline like alt rock, screamo, folk, punk, mashed together into one thing. And then there's artists like Post Malone and Mac Miller who had covered or taken a lot of inspiration from their songwriting and their albums. So who are Bright Eyes, before we get into it, in case you don't know and you're logging in and just saying, I just want to find out who they are and whatnot. So made up of three main individuals, one being Conor Oberst, who is who's definitely the most well-known person in the group, does the majority of the songwriting, if not all of the songwriting itself, plays the guitar, does the singing for the group, and has had a successful solo career, has been involved in a lot of other projects, like I just mentioned, with Phoebe Bridgers and others. So probably not a surprise that he's in the band if you're a fan of this genre of music. Other two members are probably not as well known. One being Nate Walcott, who is in charge of all the instrumentation and the full band sound. So it's, even though it's 3 people, when they record, it's, you'll hear it sounds much bigger than it actually is. Well, either he's in charge of bringing people in or doing the instrumentation on his own, which is really cool to me. And then Mike Mogis, which Mogis, who's in charge of all the recording and production. So that 3-headed monster, that team, can put together these albums and really don't need anyone else, which is probably why they work so well together. There's not a million voices in the room saying, hey, let's do this, let's do that. They decide on a direction and they run with it. They know how to work together. They've been working together for years. And so when they decided to get back together in the last couple of years to record this new album, it was probably a little rusty at first, but more or less like riding a bike in the end. So let's go back to what the point of this episode is, which is to talk about their history and give, these are just my personal picks. Some of them are kind of obvious ones that need to be talked about, which are either famous, critically acclaimed, whatever. And then some of them are probably a little bit more obscure or just ones that I find funny or good. And a lot of them are very good. So I don't think I would be playing anything that wasn't, at least in my opinion. Disclaimer. So first what I'm going to do before we go all the way back to 1999 to the EP that I want to talk about, let's go to their most famous song. So in case, I don't want you to get halfway through the show and be like, oh, that's who Bright Eyes is. No, let's start with their most famous song, then we'll go back into the beginning of the discography. So this song is called First Day of My Life. It's probably their most well-known song. It's been played commercially in terms of like TV commercials, ads, movies, all that since it came out. It's a very upbeat song. It's a very lighthearted sounding song, which is funny because most of their music isn't, and that is not what they are at all. I really like this song. But anyway, let's let it play. It's called First Day of My Life, and it's off of the 2005 album, I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning. It's probably their most commercially successful album, or at least critically acclaimed album. That's the one that Post Malone loves and listens to frequently. I love it. Really not a bad song on it. So anyway, here is First Day of My Life.
This is the first day of my life. Swear I was born right in the doorway. I went out in the rain, suddenly everything changed. They're spreading blankets on the beach. Yours is the first face that I saw. I think I was blind before I met you. And I don't know where I am, I don't know where I've been, but I know where I want to go. And so I thought I'd let you know. Yeah, these things take forever, I especially am slow. But I realized that I need you, and I wondered if I could come home.
So we'll let the song keep playing, but as you can hear, it's a pretty upbeat sounding song. His voice is nice and gentle. It's a story of love. It's a story of how love changes a person. You get into a new relationship and realize you're in love, and all of a sudden you start seeing everything around you differently. In the way that he says it here is, this is the first day of my life, as if he's just been kind of going through the motions in life and maybe in and out of previous relationships that didn't amount to anything. But now he can see what, the people spreading blankets on the beach. Yours is the first face that I saw. I think I was blind before I met you. Now I don't know where I am. I don't know where I've been, but I know where I want to go, presumably with this person. And it's funny because this is the most popular song of theirs. I would say that people know, and like, oh, yep, Bright Eyes. and it's not really like any of their other songs. So if you've only really ever heard this song, then the next songs are going to probably be a surprise to you on the whole.
Maybe this time it's different. I mean, I really think you like me.
And that last line is, I think, my favorite line in the song, which is, besides maybe this time it's different. I mean, I really think you like me, as if he's reflecting on the fact that maybe he's been burned before in relationships and now he's feeling a reciprocal, feeling in this relationship from the other person, and that's why it feels different. I don't know. Up for interpretation. So that was from 2005, I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning. Let's go back. Let's start this little journey. Let's go back to 1999 on their first major EP, which is called Every Day and Every Night. And this song is called A Perfect Sonnet. And ironically, or not so ironically if you think about the sample size of their music, but ironically, this first song, in terms of looking back, is really is it antithesis? Opposite? Is that what antithesis means? Of First Day of My Life. This song is about his reflection on his inability to commit in a relationship, how he doesn't think love is real, how, I think there's a touch of talking about adultery in this song, and how basically he thinks he's almost like this is almost like a well-written puke emoji, like when people are like, oh my God, so in love, and then people like think to themselves, blah. Like it's almost like he's written it out in a way that's more eloquent than that. So anyway, this is called The Perfect Sonnet. It is not a sonnet. There's a thing in here that talks about a sonnet. That's where the name comes from. But this is off 1999's EP, Every Day and Every Night. Here we go.
Wishing I had one desire, something that would make me never want another, something that would make it so that nothing mattered, all would be clear then. But I guess I'll have to settle for a few brief moments and watch it all dissolve into a single second, and try to write it down into a perfect sonnet, or one foolish line. 'Cause that's all that you'll get, so you'll have to accept you are here, then you're gone.
Here's my favorite line.
We should be tied together, thrown into the ocean in the worst of weather, left there to drown in their innocence. But after me, I'm coming to the final chapter. I read all of the pages in the...
So, I like it for two reasons. One is it's a reflection of he doesn't think that lovers actually exist. So he says, I believe that lovers should be tied together, thrown into the ocean in the worst of weather, and left there to drown in their innocence, which is a very interesting way to say that I don't think love exists, and if it does, go die, which is extreme. But if you look at what I think he's referencing is in Hammurabi's law, there's the penalty for infidelity is basically to have the person who's committing adultery and the two people thrown into the water, tied together, and they drown together. And I don't think he says it in here, but maybe he's the victim of infidelity in this song, and that's why he doesn't believe in love. Either way, it's just a really interesting perspective on the fact that he doesn't think that love is something that exists. And then later in the song, he talks about how lovers should be draped in flowers and laid entwined together on a bed of clover and left there to sleep, left there to dream of their happiness, as if it's like a fleeting moment that happens, as you die or whatever. So very different than First Day of My Life. Other thing that's really different is musically this sounds a lot more raw. Obviously, it's their first kind of EP, and I'm Wide Awake It's Morning is 6 years later. His voice is still, to me, sounds more like it's like a punk rock kind of voice, or even like a little bit edging on screamo, which is really interesting because he has that capability, and I think you'll hear it in a couple of the songs that I picked out. But on First Day of My Life, he doesn't sing like that at all. It's like he basically sings like any acoustic, talented acoustic singer that you may have heard before. So very, very different. So that kind of launches them into their first album, their first LP, their real LP, or at least successful one. And it's called Fevers and Mirrors. And which came out in May 29th of the year 2000. And pretty well received album. Let me just look at the track listing again. Yeah, it's a pretty well received album. I think they're still a few away from having like a full album that's top to bottom really solid, which we will get to. But my highlight of this album is called Something Vague, and this is off of Fevers and Mirrors, like I said. And this is basically a song about how lost souls, they try and find one another and find meaning in life, and I don't know, whatever, in multiple ways, which you'll hear, and they never find it, and they just end up being confused. And that's a recurring theme in his music, in Bright Eyes music, but Conor Oberst's lyrics in particular, where he talks a lot about, life happens and you're searching for meaning and you go on, and then all of a sudden you just kind of realize there maybe isn't that much meaning, and then either you're either sad, angry, okay with it, or confused, right? Which is very general in those feelings. In this case, he's talking about the confused version. So here we go. Something Vague.
Again, it seems worse than it is, but mostly the view is accurate. You see your breath in the air as you climb up the stairs to that coffin you call your apartment, and you sink in your chair, brush the snow from your hair, and drink the cold away. And you're not really sure what you're doing this for.
So, as he goes through the song, and it is a recurring theme in his music, he does touch on fatality, like a person's fatality or mortality. Yeah, mortality is what I mean. And struggles with suicide, why people don't just hang it up, or so to speak, or give up. And right here when he says, there's a dream in my brain that just won't go away. It's been stuck there since it came a few nights ago, and I'm standing on a bridge in the town where I lived as a kid with my mom and my brothers. And then the bridge disappears and I'm standing on air with nothing holding me. And so that part is a potential thought about jumping off that bridge and there's nothing holding you in terms of suicide. But then at this latter part of that verse, he says, and I hang like a star, fucking glowing in the dark for all those starving eyes to see, like the ones we've wished on. And it's the thought of, okay, well, he's ready to kill himself in these dreams, but then realizes, well, why am I doing that? And then at the end of the song, he just kind of ends up confused. He even says that, but now I'm confused. Is this death really you? So it's like this person is tired of living their life. Now they're good with killing themselves. And then are confused. Why was I thinking that in the first place? And that it's a vicious cycle. And that this is what people go through. And I don't love this song because of the subject, but I love that he was willing to take on this kind of challenging problem of this cyclical depression or being lost in society or not knowing your place or whatever, and almost romanticize it a little bit. He made it seem like it's like the line where, and I hang like a star for all the starving eyes to see, like the ones we've wished on. It's almost like he's comparing it to, this person has gotten so comfortable with ending their life that others who are in the same situation are now envious. And then the ironic part is the person who was thinking about killing themselves is no longer thinking that way. And does that happen? I don't know. I'm assuming it does for some people, but I really like that one, and I like the construction of the song, and I really like his voice, kind of back and forth. And that's probably the first taste you really get of his kind of signature. It's like a crescendo that he does with his voice, which kind of turns more into this like half scream thing, which is pretty cool. So, all right, next one that we've got is From a Balance Beam. And this actually did come out on the next album, which we're going to talk about later in the same year. But it originally came out on an EP. Let me just see when that actually came out. May 6th, 2002, called There Is No Beginning to This Story, to the Story. It later came out on an album that we'll talk about next, a few months later. But this is called, This is called From a Balance Beam. I'll talk about it along the way. This one's pretty cool.
Go from forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, from forever and ever and ever.
There's a man holding a megaphone. He must have been the voice of God. The bystanders claim they saw angels flying up and down the block. They must have been attached to wires. I seen one laying in the lawn with a broken arm. So I called 911. Well, that's one less founded opinion, one more cause for a dispute. So the street felt like a basin up with cameras and their crews. And they washed away the rumors, leaving just the concrete truth. It was a spectacle, no, I mean a miracle. So I felt like a girl from a balance beam, a gymnasium of eyes, all were holding on to me. I lifted one foot to cross the other, and I felt myself slipping. It was a small mistake. Sometimes that's all.
All right, so this song is it's kind of funny, maybe. It's his reflection on religion and life, and last song was about confusion, that individuals have in that case. It's his confusion about why people follow religion so strongly. There's a lot packed into this song, but basically it's a miracle story, a made-up miracle story, I think, that he makes up that goes awry, which is like a jab that he's making at religion. But basically he goes through, and it's just story after story about how this miracle gets more ridiculous and ridiculous as time goes on, and he's confused as to why people follow these things, which, shocker, I don't really disagree with.
Imprisoned inside that holding cell, that is my cell. So I wait for the day when I hear the key as it turns in the lock, and the guard will say to me, "Oh, my patient prisoner, you waited for."
All right, so I'm going to stop that one there because it goes on for a little bit longer, but I think you get the idea. Next, we're going to move to on the next album, which came out in August of 2002. So a few months after that single, or it was on a short EP called "There Is No Beginning to This Story." This album is called "Lifted," or "The Stories in the Soil. Keep Your Ear to the Ground." Now, I think that this was their first turn into true commercial success. And even then, I don't think that they were huge at this point, but they were certainly getting noticed. And this whole album is really good. It does. You got to be really ready to listen to this album because some of it's really harsh, which a lot of their music is, I guess. But anyway, so this is called "Lover I Don't Have to Love," and we'll talk about what it sounds like in a little bit, but it's basically about groupie sex gone completely wrong. So there's a little bit of like drug-fueled poor performance kind of thing, and then it ends with the lover, the groupie, and basically critiquing his work, musical work, right? The funny thing is that he almost wrote it in a way that sounds, if you're not listening to the lyrics, you're thinking, and you know that it's about groupie sex, you're thinking, oh, well, he's talking about he wants a lover he doesn't have to like reciprocate love back with. He just wants a one night stand, which is all true. But if you don't really listen to it, you don't realize that the whole thing goes sideways, and then he's getting critiqued at the end, which is almost funny. So here we go. "Lover I Don't Have to Love," off of the 2002 album "Lifted," or "The Story Is in the Soil. Keep Your Ear to the Ground." I'll let him kind of get to the chorus, and I'll stop talking at the chorus. But every time I listen to this song, and it's like very similar timing to The Height of Brand New, this is really, really sounds like it could be a brand new song. Not only musically, but also the way that he's singing sounds like something off Deja Entendu. I can never remember how to say that.
I want a lover I don't have to love. I want a girl who's just out to give a fuck. Here is the kid with the chemicals. I thought he said to meet him here, but I'm not sure. I got the money if you got the time. You said it feels good. I said I'll give it a try. Then my
So especially there, you can really hear you still sound like Conor Oberst, obviously, singing, but it does kind of sound like a little bit, especially in this quiet part where he's singing these verses, he kind of sounds like Jesse Lacey.
Actors with bad habits, some sad,
especially this little echo reverb thing.
They just play tragic and the phone's ringing and the van's leaving. Let's just keep touching, let's just keep singing. I wanna love her, I don't have to love. I want a boy.
And I don't think we've heard on any other songs to this point, but you can hear the strings in the background.
I got a hunger and I can't see
the cello. That's what the notes say. Greta Cohn on the cello. But it was all, presumably all arranged by Nate, which is well done in this album.
Such pretty words, but life's no storybook. Love's an excuse to get hurt, and to hurt. Do you like to hurt? I do, then hurt me.
So that is Lover I Don't Have to Love. A couple other ones that I won't play all the way through on this album, but I will play an excerpt from them each. Next one is Bowl of Oranges. And what Bowl of Oranges is about is how sometimes you can help a person through their darkest place in life by just being there. You don't have to do anything special, you just have to exist. So the title comes from the thought that you can't make those moments with someone stay still if they're having issues and you're trying to help them through. And the comparison that he draws to it is you can't capture something like a photograph, or in this case, a bowl of oranges in a still life painting. So people's problems are going to keep changing and moving, and just being there for them is probably the most important thing that you can do. So a lot of his stuff comes from a place of, maybe some depression and issues that either he has or somebody else around him has had. And it's I think a pretty mature reflection of, hey, you can do something for somebody by not really doing that much. And don't forget, their problems are going to continually change, and they're not going to be still like a bowl of oranges in a still life painting. So here's Bowl of Oranges.
The rain had started tapping on the window near my bed. There was a loophole in my dreaming, so I got out of it. And to my surprise, my eyes were wide and already open. Just my nightstand and my dresser, where those nightmares had just been. So I dressed myself and left then, out into the grey streets. But everything seemed different and completely new to me. The sky, the trees, houses, buildings, even my own body. And each person I encountered, I couldn't wait to meet. And I came upon a doctor who appeared in quite poor health. I said, there's nothing that I can do for you, you can't do for yourself. He said, oh yes you can, just hold my hand, I think that would help. So I sat with him a while, then I asked him how he felt. He said, I think I'm cured. In fact, I'm sure of it. Thank you, stranger, for your therapeutic smile.
So in this case, this is a story about this himself, maybe, whatever, this character who leaves his house, goes out upon his day, and stumbles upon this doctor he's saying, I can't help you, he has poor health or whatever. And he just says, by just being here, you're helping me enough. And he has this way of weaving, in this case, he's the happy person helping other people, but it's still a pretty dark, hard subject of saying, you can help pull other people out of depression, darkness, issues, whatever. And so they have this way in the band of wrapping sad subjects or serious subjects or heavy subjects into different types of music. It doesn't always have to sound sad, or doesn't always have to sound, hard rock kind of thing. In this case, it's like this upbeat folk busking sound, which doesn't align with the actual message of the lyrics.
There's our lives are fractions of a whole, but if the world could remain within a frame like a painting on a wall, then I think we'd see the beauty, then we'd stand staring in awe at our still lives.
So, song wraps in a second here, but that is Bowl of Oranges. So the last song I want to talk about on this album is Let's Not Shit Ourselves, To Love and Be Loved. So it's the finale to the song. It's 10 minutes. I'm definitely not going to play the whole thing, but it's basically this angry outburst from Connor about the most common thing that happens in life, which is failure. So here we go.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Can I get a goddamn timpani roll to start this goddamn song? Tonight, here's a goddamn song. For all you goddamn people.
So I think this is probably the most rock song in the album. And he goes through and gives example after example of these really interesting lines. And I wonder if he just had all these lines written down in notebooks and kind of jammed them all into the song for the course of 10 minutes. Or if he decided he wanted to write about failure and the things going wrong in the world or that happened to people, and just came up with, analogy after analogy, which either way is really impressive to me.
The apple tree and lands in the grass and weeps for his dignity. Next time he will not aim so high. Yet next time neither will I. Mother takes loans out, sends her kids off to colleges. Her family's reduced to names on a shopping list.
So he talks about single mothers taking out loans for kids to go to colleges. He talks about how people end up becoming like their parents even though they don't want to. He talks about the war, at that time was the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, because this was 2002, and he was a pretty vocal, anti-war, outspoken person at the time after 9/11. So he hits a lot of different things here in really a song that sounds like just you can dance along to and all that. And I just said this for the last song. Again, it's another song, if you don't listen to the lyrics and don't understand what they're about, you're probably like, well, that's a fun rock song. Well, it is, but it's also a reflection on a lot of problems and things going wrong. So that was my highlights. There's still more. I think you should listen to the full album of Lifted or The Story Is in the Soil, Keep Your Ear to the Ground. That's a great album from 2002. What came out next is my absolute favorite, probably a lot of people's favorites. So I'm excited to talk about this album. We already played one song from it, which is First Day of My Life, which came out on the 2005 album I'm Wide Awake It's Morning. We talked about Post Malone loves that album. A lot of people do. I mean, this was, the kind of the height of, at least for me, of Bright Eyes and, high school and all that. So it opens up with a song called At the Bottom of Everything. So I'm going to play it. It opens up with a long story. It's a story about a person two people on an airplane, and how they don't essentially there's a plane crash, and the plane is set to fall into the ocean, and how there's one person who's panicking and the other person who's trying to reassure them, and in that moment of death they turn into a celebration. And it's almost like a celebration that it's okay if life is a complete mess, and it's all right if you don't end up where you want to go, and it's only upon them, being plunging to their death that they become okay with that. So I'll play a little bit of that opening monologue or story and then cut to the music.
So there was this woman, and she was on an airplane, and she was flying to meet her fiance, sailing high above the largest ocean on planet Earth, and she was seated next to this man who, she had tried to start conversations, and the only thing she'd heard him say was just to order his Bloody Mary. And when she was sitting there and she was reading this really arduous magazine article about a third world country that she couldn't even pronounce the name of. And
so he's setting up the story of these two people, a male and a female, sitting on a plane next to each other, and he's noticing, she's really disconnected with the world, or she's reading about things that she's not really connected with and kind of glossing over, and he's just kind of enjoying himself on the plane, and the plane starts to fall. Anyway, the male character in this case starts to try and get her to, like I said, celebrate something more, and it kicks off into this.
He says, "We're going to a party. It's a birthday party. It's your birthday party. Happy birthday, darling. We love you very, 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 very much." And then he starts humming this little tune, and it kind of goes like this. It's kind of 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
And so basically, there were strangers who get thrown into this traumatic event, and now they're, they got to reassure each other. And it's a reflection. The rest of the song is a reflection about the things that should have changed or should be changing in the world. And it's only upon, maybe if you look at it in the perspective of the characters, only upon them plummeting to realize that all these things need to change.
We must sing, we must sing.
And my favorite part is the Jim James backing vocal here.
While my mother waters plants, my father loads his gun. He says death will give us back to God, just like the setting sun is returned to the lonesome ocean.
So,
and then they splashed into the deep blue sea.
And then, so like that, right? This crash is like a celebration. It's wild. So that's how they kick off the album. They kick off I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning with that as the note. First Day of My Life doesn't come until the second half of the album, side 2, if you will, if you're listening to the vinyl. The next song is Lua, which you may know as the Mac Miller cover, which is a fantastic cover if you haven't listened to it. It does sound a lot like the actual version on the album, but there's also a version online if you Google it with Conor Oberst, the First Aid Kit Sisters, and Taylor Goldsmith. That's amazing. Was lucky enough to see First Aid Kit play with Conor Oberst and do that already. Plus you add in Taylor Goldsmith. It was great. So let's play that. This is Lua from I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning.
know that it is freezing, but I think we have to walk. I keep waving at the taxis, they keep turning their lights off. But Julie knows a party at some actor's West Side loft. Supplies are endless in the evening, by the morning they'll be gone. When everything is lonely, I can be my own best friend. I get a coffee and the paper, have my own conversations with the sidewalk and the
So,
pictures in my window.
very, very somber song. Very somber. And arranged like so, with just the guitar. And Oberst on the vocals.
You have a heavy heart, I can feel it when we kiss. So many men stronger than me have thrown their backs out, trying to lift it. But me, I'm not a gamble. You can count on me to split the love I saw you in the evening, by the morning won't exist.
So I wanted to play that. Make sure you heard that part. So this whole song is about being in a relationship and carrying someone's emotional and past baggage. And in this case, it's about a person who has a substance abuse issue of some sort, who is lonely, has depression, all these things. And that line, I can feel, and I know you have a heavy heart, I can feel it when we kiss. So many men stronger than me have thrown their backs out trying to lift it. And it's almost like the character is saying it's okay that you have that, but you need to be okay with that baggage that you're carrying, which is, very, very interesting perspective. I guess that's probably a very real perspective of relationships, but it's really well done. And also, if you've ever seen them play it live, it's everybody seems to know the words to this song. If you're at one of their shows, it's beautiful. So the last song I'll play from this album, I've played four in total, including First Day of My Life, is, and I think if you had to ask me and stop me and say, what's my favorite Bright Eyes song of all time, I think I would say this next one, which is called Poison Oak. So anyone that knows me well knows how obsessed I am with nostalgia and reminiscing over things, but then also not necessarily obsessed in terms of the fact that I love it, but it can quickly change to sadness and be something, or you're missing something, or you're longing to relive those moments. So this song is about missing somebody who you spent a lot of time with growing up and wishing you can have some of these moments back with them, even if they're not great moments. So here we go. Poison Oak. And Oberst has never said who exactly it is, but it's most likely about his cousin who committed suicide just before this album came out. Most likely.
When a telephone was a tin can on a string, and I fell asleep with you still talking to me. You said you weren't afraid to die.
And so if it is the person who committed suicide, he's talking about, you said you weren't afraid to die, and then in one of the verses, and then in the chorus, he's reflecting on probably the final moment that he saw this person, where he says, then when you turned away, when you slammed the door, when you stole the car and drove towards Mexico,
I don't think
and you wrote bad checks just to fill your arm, meaning most likely heroin. I was young enough, I still believed in war, which, he's political, right? He's reflecting on being young and naive and thinking that war is a good way to go for some of these conflicts and all that. But obviously tying that in with, just giving the context of how young he was when this person left.
believed in war.
And so one of the reasons that I really love this song is you're going to hear a really short chorus here, and then probably one of my most favorite vocal moments on any album ever, which I feel like is a bold statement, but I think it is.
And all their tearful words would turn back into steam. But me, I'm a single cell on a serpent's tongue. There's a muddy field where a garden was, and I'm glad you got away, but I'm still stuck out here. My clothes are soaking wet from your brother's tears.
Oh, man. So it's his cousin, if it is his cousin, right? So my clothes are soaking wet from your brother's tears, right? Obviously, whatever, at the funeral or whatever it might be. And it's just like, it's such a sad song, but it's so perfectly constructed, in my opinion. It talks about how this person got what they really wanted. They got away. They, live their dream if you want to. But from his perspective, they're all stuck with the sadness. Oh, man, it's tough.
On a piano bench, and when I press the keys, it all gets reversed. The sound of loneliness makes me happier.
All right, so that was my little reflection on I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning. I would listen to that whole album if I were you, if you haven't already. It's phenomenal. Very sad. All of it's very sad. I should put that in like the notes at the beginning. This is going to be a very sad podcast. So on the same day that I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning came out, so did Digital Ash in a Digital Urn. And if I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning is like the traditional folk acoustic album, Digital Ash in a Digital Urn is the polar opposite of that, and it's synth and drum machine and whatnot. To be honest, I didn't really love it. I still don't really love it, just because the music side of it doesn't really align with what I like typically. But there is a song on there that's worth noting and worth talking about, and it's the digital sound is not something that they just did once. They did it again, and candidly, I think they got better at it as time went on and knew where to fit it. But doing it as a whole album may be just a little bit too much for me personally. But I do really like this song. It's called Take It Easy, in parentheses, Love Nothing. And there's a common thread. So this album came out the same day as I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning, which has First Day of My Life. And it has a very similar theme. and even I believe an almost fully repeated line from the other song. So it's, maybe it's sister, kind of pairing. So here it is. Take it easy, love nothing.
First with your hands, then with your mouth. A downpour sweat, damp cotton clouds. I was a fool, you were my friend. We made it happen. You took off your clothes, left on the light. You stood there so brave, you used to be shy. Each feature improved, each movement refined, and eyes like a showroom.
This song, actually, now that I listen to it again, reminds me of, like, it could be that music in the background could be on the Stranger Things soundtrack. So it's a very similar theme, but it's kind of the antithesis of this is the second time I used that phrase today on this show. Whew. I gotta get a new word. It's the antithesis, third time, of First Day of My Life, which is basically tried to have love and it kind of fell apart and is now upset about it, basically. But the line in First Day of My Life is they're spreading blankets on the beach, and then the song he also says now they are spreading out now they're spreading out blankets on the beach. So it's almost just like everything is the negative view of everything he's seeing, as opposed to the positive view of everything that he's seeing in that relationship in First Day of My Life. So before we get to the next album that Bright Eyes released, which was not for 2 more years, there was a single that came out which just like makes me laugh. But I mean, he wrote it in a very serious way, but I think it's really funny, as well as being an important topic. So this next one is called When the President Talks to God, and it's a conversation or a question, not really a conversation, of what happens when President George W. Bush has a conversation with God, and is it real or is it bullshit, basically. And there's some great lines in here which are still issues today in today's election, for one, or election season that we're going into. But also I really wish that he would write one about Trump right now, because he got so much attention for this song, and it made such a big splash that I would love to hear what he has to say about our current situation. So anyway, here is When the President Talks to God. It was a single that he released in 2005.
When the president talks to God, are the conversations brief or long? Does he ask to rape our women's rights and send poor farm kids off to die? Does God suggest an oil hike when the president talks to God? When the president...
So the good thing about this song is, unlike some other Bright Eyes songs, that you know exactly where he stood on George W. Bush. Clearly not a fan. And also is, if you listen to a lot of his music, is also really not a fan or doesn't understand religion and why people value religion so highly.
Drawl or merely nod. Agree which convicts should be killed, where prisons should be built and filled, which voter fraud must be concealed when the president talks to God.
And the religious side of it, and then the topics that he's talking about were such hot topics. And the one that I just wanted to pause for right there was which voter fraud must be concealed. And there's not a war going on right now, at least in the same fashion that was happening in Iraq. But he just goes through all of these subjects, and most of them are still the same to be, in terms of fair game to be critiqued. Just be really interesting to hear what he would what he would say now. Anyway, so the next album that came out, full album, was called Casadega, which I think was probably his first real move into, has some elements of bluegrass and some more like country folk as opposed to just being like alt rock, maybe some screamo, maybe, whatever else we listened to already. But it's a little bit more folk bluegrass sound, which I think started to appeal to more and more people. This first song is called Four Winds, and it's really, I think his first true attempt at maybe bluegrass, folk bluegrass. I don't know of any other time that it's happened, but it's just another song about angst against religion and, more importantly, the hypocrisy that exists throughout it. So here we go. Four Winds on the 2007 album Casadega. You can hear the fiddle, I guess, is whatever that is, violin, and just sounds like a bluegrass band. It's great.
You clash, you cast your country, set your name or your tribe. There's people always dying, trying to keep them alive. There's bodies decomposing in containers tonight, in an abandoned building where the squatters made a mural of a Mexican girl with 15 cans of spray paint in a chemical swirl. She's standing in the ashes at the end of the world, four winds blowing through her hair. But when great Satan's gone, the horror of
So he really sets it up in the first line. Your class, your caste, your country, sect, your name of your tribe. So he basically says, I'm going to call out all these things. Okay.
The Bible's blind, the Torah's deaf, the Quran's mute. If you burn them all together, you get close to the truth. Still, they're pouring over Sanskrit under Ivy League moons, while shadows lengthen in the sun. Cast on a school of meditation built to soften the times and hold us at the center while the spiral unwinds. It's knocking over fences, crossing property lines. Four winds cry until it comes. It's the summer man slouching towards.
So one of the lines that's in here is, the Bible's blind, the Torah's deaf, the Quran is mute, but if you burn them all together, you'd get close to the truth. And I think what he's trying to do here is comment on the fact that people live so tightly based off of what's written in these books, which is fine for some people, but when you get people who are extremists and they end up, using it as a tool to either control other people, make money, whatever, like it all falls apart for him. And he compares it to later in the song where there's cults and genocides, and even talking about people who spend a lot of money at the top of these religions and have a Cadillac and a company jet, and those people pay no attention to the orphans or the the people who are less fortunate and all that. And so are they really in it for everybody, or are they in it for themselves? And I think Four Winds is a part of shamanism. So I don't know if that means that's like what he believes in or what he's studying or not. I really don't know. But just another one of his angsty reflections on, big religion, that sort of thing. The next song on this album, which I really do like, and I've heard this song live a couple times, is Soul Singer in a Session Band. And I like it for a few reasons, but I really, really like the sound of the music, for one. His chorus, the way that he sings it is unique. And then the story. So he doesn't have a lot of songs that are about... he's got a lot of religion and love and relationships. He started to get into more political things, but he doesn't have a lot of stuff that's about the plight of the working man or falling. He's got a song about failure, which we talked about before, but which is Let's Not Shit Ourselves. But he doesn't have really that many examples to this point of songs about people who can't come out of poverty or get stepped over or whatever. But he does in this album. It's called Soul. I can't say that. Soul Singer in a Session Band. Maybe that's why it's so good, is because I can't even say it. But he's using the soul singer in the session band as the way to tell the story about musicians and other people who work really hard their whole lives who get stepped over or passed over. And I think that's a really good way for him to broach kind of that subject. So here we go.
The soul singer in the session band, shredded to ribbons beneath a microphone stand, felt the quickness of pity like a flash in a pan for the soul singer in the session band. A red carpet bagger makes a blackberry call to the plastic piranhas in the city of salt. Wasted wheat paste campaign posts, no bills on the wall. You mean nothing to no one, but that's nobody's fault.
So he just said, you mean nothing to no one, and that's no one's fault. And he's talking about how this soul singer in the session band is shredded to ribbons. It's a great analogy. How he's basically been ripped apart and just left to be, a session band is basically, you come into a studio if you're a musician and you say, I need a session band. It's like this guy that they have on tap for you to use. And this person probably had high hopes of living the dream, so to speak, and rising through the music industry and everything, and basically got chewed up and spit out. One of the things that he reflects on, which is not always easy for artists to make these jumps, and I think he does it really nicely, is he's talking about campaign posters and basically linking. So he's using the analogy of the working man by having a session musician be the example. But what he's actually doing is linking people who are running for politics do not care about the working man and the working class and all that stuff. So he's using this example to make that link. Maybe not so in your face, but in my opinion, that's exactly what he's doing.
Funerals, but he still never wept. Now sorrow is pleasure when you want it instead. Just like that soul singer in the session band, we're like an infant atop a white baby grand.
And I think you probably just heard it, one of the lines that's really powerful is that I'm pretty sure he's reflecting on a politician or somebody in that type of position, but he's been to weddings and funerals, but he still never wept. As in, it's all a show. Like, it's not for you. They do these things and they shake hands and kiss babies or whatever, but it's not for you. So I really like that song. That album, I don't know that it got crazy great reviews, but it has some really good songs on it. So I suggest you listen to that. Last album we're going to talk about is The People's Key, which came out in 2011, which was the last album that they released before the most recent album, Down in the Weeds, Where the World Once Was. So the first song we're going to cover is it's actually the second song on the album. It's the first song that is uninterrupted. What I mean by that is I don't know when this became a style of Bright Eyes music, but they like to put in these little excerpts at the beginning of these albums and sometimes the end, which is the case in this and some other albums as well, but where it's like talking or something very psychedelic, or, you know, there was the tape recorder that plays in From a Balance Beam at the beginning. So they do that here and there, which I think makes some of their albums feel more like you're watching a play, or it's like supposed to be digested in that way than individual songs, which I like. I mean, I'm probably going to touch on that now that I think about it in the review of Down in the Weeds, Where the World Once Was. But anyway, so here's Shell Games, which this song is basically a reflection of. So he's again using an analogy, and Oberst is really, really good at making these jumps, but life seems so simple, but then you actually start to play it and it's really hard. And that's basically, if you know what a shell game is, it's like track the ball. You know, if you've got 3 cups or shells, I guess, if that's really what they were at the beginning, but you track the object under the shells, and it seems like it's so simple when you walk up to the street vendors or whatever who's doing that, but in reality it's super hard. And that's how life is. So here we go. Shell Games from The People's Key in 2011.
Took the fireworks and the vanity, the circuit board and the city streets, shooting star swaying palm tree, laid it at the arbiter's feet. If I could change my mind, change the paradigm, prepare myself for another life, forgive myself for the many times I was cruel to something helpless and weak. But here I come, that heavy love, I'm never gonna move it alone. Here I come, that heavy love, tag it on a tenement wall. Here I come, that heavy love, someone gotta share in the load. Oh, here I come, that heavy love, I'm never gonna move it alone.
I love that little intro, and then it builds into a different, musically it sounds very different after that, about a minute in. So there's a lot of lines in here. The one that I still don't really understand is, what is the heavy love? I don't know if that's a religious thing or something else that I just can't put my finger on. But basically, you know, talks through, there's an architect who imagined this for the everyman, slipping steadily into madness. Now that's the only place to be free. It just goes through and says that you get to the end and you kind of look back and you're like, wow, I would have done things really differently. He says it towards the beginning of the song: if I could change my mind, change the paradigm, prepare myself for another life, forgive myself for the many times I was cruel to someone helpless and weak. So it's basically like, I think this is written at the end, or towards the end, it's supposed to be towards the end of somebody's life in kind of retrospect. But I love the analogy of, this is a shell game and life is harder than it seems when you first look at it.
Distorted sounds on oscilloscopes, distorted facts I could never cope. My private life is an inside joke. No one will explain it to me. We'll be everything that we ever need. Everyone on the count of three. Everyone on the count of three.
All right, so that was Shell Games. I really like that song. One of the things I didn't mention beforehand is he names all of the album covers at the beginning of it. So it makes me think that this, and it kind of how it played out, but this album was supposed to be their last album as Bright Eyes, and it was almost like this album had a little bit of like they were tying a bow on their career. So the beginning of this song, which was Shell Games, took the fireworks and the vanity and the circuit boards and the city streets, which are the vanity is from Fevers and Mirrors, circuit board is from Digital Ash and Digital Urn, city streets is I'm Wide Awake It's Morning, Shooting Star is Casadega. So they or maybe that's Swaying Palm Tree, I forget which one, but anyway. And he laid it all at the arbiter's feet, basically like hey, how have I done here? Well, how does this look? So there's that song on here. And then this one, which we're about to play, which is One for You, One for Me, which I like it for two reasons. One is this is the last thing that we were supposed to hear from Bright Eyes, which has an interesting take on it as to what they were trying to do in their, if that was going to be like the closing act to their whole career together. And then the other is the story of why it was written or how it was written is really interesting, where basically Conor Oberst was on tour or something and in a German hotel room and didn't have anything to do all day and started getting really creeped out by this hotel room and the pictures that were in it and just how weird it felt and everything. So he starts writing down like these things. And at the end of it, he is almost like he ties it back to he doesn't understand the world and love, loss, religion, politics, all that, and talks about he doesn't know whether it's you or whether it's me, whether it's, and figuratively it might not be a person, but it might be like, are politics supposed to be this screwed up? Or is religion supposed to be this screwed up? Do I just not get religion? So it's almost like they still never answer the question throughout their whole career, which I think is really interesting. So anyway, here is One for You, One for Me.
One for the righteous, one for the ruling class. One for the tyrant, one for the slaughtered lamb. One for the struggle, one for the lasting peace. One for you and one for me.
So it's a reflection in the fact that like I did an album, or maybe if you want to think about it as an album, it could be a song, but I did all these different things for different subjects and different people, but I did one for you and one for me. It's almost like this goodbye, right? And he kind of ties it now to one for the Fuhrer, one for the child bride, one for the wedding, one for the suicide, which is kind of like the story of Hitler. It goes back to that German hotel, but he now is he reflects on things he doesn't understand in this world, which I think is a good way to end it, because he's leaving it up to, well, we tried to do all of these things and tried to figure them all out, and we just can't. It's not worth trying to figure out, or there's, what's the point in trying to figure these things out? They'll never make sense. And I think it's a fitting ending considering how the rest of Bright Eyes' career was. So, luckily, Bright Eyes' career is not over. They released a new album a couple weeks ago, which we're going to cover in part 2 later this week of Bright Eyes. I don't even know what I'm going to call it yet, so I won't attempt to call it, but I know it'll be part 1 and part 2. See, I got those fingers right. And this is your little tour of what I think was important to know before you listen to the last album, or maybe you listen to the newest album and you don't know anything about it, and like, I don't get any of that, let me go back and listen to this. So I hope it helps somebody some way or the other, or no one will listen to this because it's probably an hour and a half and probably 3 hours between the two, so somewhere in between. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on part 2. This was another episode of Talkin Folk. If you like what we're doing at John Boy Media Music, please like, subscribe, tell your friends, leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts. It all helps. Catch you on the next one.
One for